I remember one time when Jeffrey was a young boy. We're driving in the car, the family was all together, and we saw a billboard with the Marlboro Man, and it was a big, handsome guy and rugged good looks, and he was obviously intended to be somebody you'd want to be. But Jeffrey, he was 3 or 4 years old. He said, "That's a bad man." And I said, "Jeffrey, why do you say that?" And he said, "Because he's smoking." And that was Jeffrey. Things were black and white with him. He understood what the rules were, and the rule was that smoking was bad. So he thought that man was a bad man. Um, Jeffrey started dabbling with drugs during high school. The first illegal drug that he took was an acquaintance gave him something like Ritalin so that he could focus on an activity that he was involved in, um, and just went on from there. We had no knowledge of this at all until the summer between high school and college, and in the month of August, I'll never forget that month. It was a very difficult month for us. His mood changed. He became angry. Um, he became out of sorts. And at first we wondered if he was just anxious about going off to college. But then Deb discovered that he was cutting, and that was really hard to discover, because that was really our first clue that Jeffrey was really struggling. I mean, we knew that he could be shy around people and kind of withdrawn and kind of quiet, but we just thought that was his personality. This was a real indication that Jeffrey was struggling, and we just kind of went off the deep end. It really threw us for a loop. Um, I've heard people say that cutting is not necessarily something to get all nervous about. It's a call for help. We didn't know that at the time, and it really shook us up quite a bit. Um, a week or so later, we came to find out, and I don't recall how we came to find out, but we realized he was doing cocaine. And that was really devastating too, because to me, cocaine is a very powerful drug. It's not a drug that good kids use. And it really bothered us a lot. And we really became concerned about Jeffrey's state of mind. We knew he wasn't healthy, and we knew we had to get him help, professional help. So we really started making a concerted effort to get him admitted into a hospital. It took us a week or two, but we finally got him admitted into Emerson. He was in there for 3 days. He cleaned out. He stopped his drug use completely. He had to. But then a week or two later, he was supposed to be going off to college, and we talked to some experts, and they suggested that college is probably not a bad place for him. It'll be a structured environment. He'll have help there. He'll have support there. He'll have things to do. It won't be like he'll have a lot of spare time. So off he went. I don't know exactly what happened. I think he probably stayed off drugs for a short time, but I think the temptation was just too great. And it was just part of the dorm scene. There was a lot of drugs, a lot of drinking, and Jeffrey, took part in it all. And I think in hindsight, it really kind of interfered with his treatment. We were going down and getting him every 2 weeks, and he was coming back home to get therapy and to get medication prescribed. And it helped him out at first, but as the year went on, he just seemed like he was really shaky that year. Um, and I really do attribute it to the fact that he was probably taking drugs pretty regularly. Um, he realized that this was causing him a problem, and actually, it was his idea to transfer out of that college and live at home and commute to a local college. Um, and so when he did that, I think his lifestyle was more stable. He knew mom and dad were around, and so he had to kind of stay on the straight and narrow a little bit more. He still went out with his friends, and he still took some drugs, I believe, and he certainly drank. But it wasn't to the extent when he was away at college. But still, I think it interfered with the treatment that he was getting. and it just wasn't as effective, and he continued to struggle. He had good times, he had bad times, but in hindsight, I really think that once he opened the door to drug use, he just couldn't shake it. He just couldn't put it behind him. And one time Deb talked to him and she said, you know, Jeff, you're such a rule follower. Why is it that you got involved with drugs? It's, you know, we all know that drugs is wrong, and you know that. And he said, well, once you cross the line gets blurred, and that's it, you know. So in hindsight, I really think that his drug use and abuse, alcohol use and abuse, dramatically affected his ability to get treatment.
So if someone's struggling with anxiety or depression, it makes sense that they might try to feel better. And so it's easy to understand why people might turn to negative coping strategies such as drinking or drugging or cutting or some of those behaviors. It's hard to sit sometimes with feeling depressed. It's hard to feel anxious. If you're alone, those are feelings that people maybe want to change and change quickly. So there is a need to reach out for someone or something, and sometimes drugs, drinking, cutting, those kinds of negative coping skills bring an instant relief that on the one hand seems to work and work fast, and over time seems to only make the situation worse or the signs and symptoms worse.
So most drugs of abuse, whether it's alcohol, the marijuana, the nicotine, or cocaine, they all work on the pleasure center of the brain. And the way they get you the high is through this chemical which is called dopamine. Now, there are not natural ways of getting this high. Like if you're really good at doing something and you feel good about it, that's what you're triggering. You're releasing the dopamine, and whether you did great in sports or you like music or you are proud of what you did, it gives you the high. But unlike this natural high, the drugs of abuse kind of bypass the normal pathways, and they just directly go to the brain and stimulate the receptors to release this rush of dopamine, and which feels extremely good. It's an explosive feeling, and people, when they feel this high, they want it again because it's easy to get. It is, in a short run, it gives you more good feeling, and it is on demand. But the problem is now your brain receptors want it again and again. The minute the effect of the drug wears off, it wants it again. So that starts the cycle of the person looking for drugs all the time or being preoccupied by it, and leads to the abuse and the addiction.
So one of the things that we know about cutting or self-injury is that it's usually rooted in or really a coping mechanism. It's about dealing with stress, dealing with something that is really hard emotionally to deal with, and it's maladaptive. It's obviously not something we want someone to do, but that's usually why they're doing it. And it's important to know as a clinician to figure out whether or not there's any suicidal thoughts as well, but it's not always connected. It's not usually something that has gone to that level. But people can engage in what I would refer to as destructive behavior. But it's to somehow relieve the stress or to cope with a situation that just seems like too much.
In my work, sometimes I talk to people who cut themselves, and then I talk to people who drink or drug, and I'm always amazed at the similarities between the two, because most of the time people say to me, I do it because I need relief. I'm going to look at, say right now, marijuana use and cutting. Always the answers are the same. I can't settle down without it. My stomach's in knots. I can't sleep. And when I cut, or if I smoke a joint, I feel better. It doesn't last long, but I feel better. And so, in many ways, they seem like very different behaviors, but they are achieving the same results.
For us to make the depression go away, you have to stop the marijuana use too. I mean, that's what usually what we present as, is that depression is one problem, but the substance abuse is the second problem. And if we are trying to treat the depression, unless that second issue is addressed too by stopping the marijuana use or alcohol use, we're not going to see any results.
So one of our strategies in working with someone who's either abusing substances or engaging in some newer behavior that is otherwise destructive is to target that behavior and say and try to figure out new ways to cope with the stressors that are happening. And so there's two parts to that. One, what's going on that's leading to that desperate act, if you will. What's happening? Can we adjust what's happening? And if that is going to be a slower process, then how do we replace how they manage those spikes in stress? There are a lot of times where a young person is drinking, and it's commonly referred to as a social sort of maybe more normalized use, where it then turns into a more abusing the substance situation because they're using it to manage or self-medicate or sort of help them endure some difficult situation. And of course, if you do that, and there's a property to it where it works. It's short term and creates a new problem, but it works to sort of manage that short term stressful situation. So we need to find new ways to manage those kinds of situations, which are going to come from time to time. Any fix we have isn't going to be perfect or quick, and so if as things are improving, there are still going to be ups and downs. And when we're in those times that are really difficult to manage, people need other ways to cope.
So even if these drugs, whether it's alcohol or marijuana, makes someone feel better or calmer in the short run, ultimately what they're doing is destroying the brain. And someone who also suffers from depression, at that point, it becomes very hard for us to treat it adequately.